Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. I apologize to you all. My name is Sonya LaRae, and I'm here to just kind of help April out and bring in this dynamic discussion. So, look, you're in the Authentic Love Academy. Make sure that you're following this fabulous club by coming all the way up to the top of the house, clicking the little green mansion, hitting the bell so you're notified each and every time a brand new discussion is birthed in this space. We have Scott and I'm sorry, I don't see the other name. Can I get your wife's name too?
Connie?
Scott and Connie here as our special guests tonight. We are going to really be leaning all the way in. If you're listening to the playbacks, please make sure that you join us. We're here every Tuesday evening, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And with that being said, April, I release the mic to you.
Oh, my. I am just so excited to be here this evening. Yes, we are continuing to celebrate Loving Month. And yes, I am April, and I'm the Loveologist. I'm a certified dating coach, and I specialize in intercultural relationships. Also, I'm the author of the book, What Your Mama Didn't Tell You About Dating, and the host here at the Authentic Love Academy. So I help those of you who are interested in intercultural relationships to attract that special someone that I know you've been looking for quite a while so that you can say, I do at the altar. I am so excited to have our guests here, Scott and Connie, and we are going to do some chatting with them and learn some more things about interracial relationships, interracial dating, interracial marriage. We're just going to learn whatever we can here tonight. So, Connie and Scott, say hello to the peoples.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, people.
Hello, people. So glad you're with us. All right. Very good.
Awesome. I have a few questions here, and we'll just go ahead and get started. So, how long have you two been married?
22 years.
I'm jealous, but okay.
Yes, every bit of 22 years.
Wow.
Hmm.
So, being married for 22 years. Now, my question is to you, Scott. Can you tell us what is a good way or the best way to approach a black woman? Because some of these guys, they're like, not sure how to do that. I relinquish the mic.
Yes, yes, of course. I'd be more than happy to answer. First of all, in I suppose in today's climate, because it is a little bit remarkably different than the time when Connie and I met. I will say this: if indeed you are willing to engage in any intercultural situation, you may want to ask yourself why you're even there. Um, because the answers will come out in how you engage. Um, so it may be a good idea to come up with that first. So let me start out the best way I know how, just to start out with my experience rather than my opinion. My experience is that of approaching, as you say, I'll just use your question to approach a black woman. First of all, I don't approach people by their color. I approach people. Okay, because I have a lot. I have come to a whole lot of conclusions about these things. I mean, for example, since we're here now, we might as well say it. Race or racism, because I do believe it's racism, not wasm. It's still happening. And it's still happening in manifold ways that some of us are more aware of than others. And when I approached Constance, um, it was as the result of an already active relationship that was there. Um, we met in a choir. We met in a choir, and I'll just say it. It was remarkably different that I actually joined this particular group, but um, I had no intentions of approaching her initially. I just happened to know that she was particularly skilled at the task that was presented her. So I would lean in toward her to make sure that I understood the part that I was supposed to sing at the time. But to anybody who doesn't have that opportunity or that as part of their own general circumstance, I would just say, and first of all, you may be handicapping yourself if you're going to approach a black woman as a black woman. Because I get it, man. A whole lot of us are seeing people through color filters. We're seeing each other through that. And I take it in faith that that's a problem that we need to work around. When I was able, quite literally in the experience that I've been journeying through, to see people as people, that alone was more than enough to make people more than approachable. I'll stop there.
Oh my goodness, I love that, Scott, because literally you have broke that divide because so many times people always want to put it as far as it goes color, but I love that you saw the person more than anything and everything else. Um, Connie, what about for you? What attracted you into Scott?
Yes, it was basically his love for God, his knowledge and his love for God, his passion for God. I'm not as long winded as he is.
So let me get this straight. You two just happen to be at the same church and just happen to be in the same choir. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to reverse here. So, Connie, well, actually, both of you, can you guys just tell us about your dynamic, as I call it? What is your heritage, shall I say?
Oh, okay. Well, I am African American,
Mhm.
and
that,
Scott is more than one.
that yes, me. I'm 3/4 Puerto Rico of or Puerto Rican descent, and 1/4, as it were, Colombian, as in Colombia and South America. And both of my parents had emigrated here separately, yet found themselves in New York City, um, where they knew the same people, and ended up. I mean, as far back as Puerto Rico, they found out they knew some of the same people while they were still there before they immigrated here, and so that's where I come from. Any African American or African descent is a little bit far back in there. I think a couple, 3 generations on my father's side, but it is there is a presence there, and so there has always been um, somewhat of an identity and affinity for that strain, as well as I mean, as well as other strains. I mean, I've since I was born in New York and in that environment, and moved later on to California, where I would spend almost 20 years. I've got more than my fair share of opportunities to see how diverse our population base is, as well as how polarizing that same population base can be. I'll stop there.
Now, in your household, is there two or three or one or how many languages are spoken in your household?
There's only one.
Yeah, it
Scott is the only one who speaks Spanish, and he doesn't think he speaks it well enough to.
hmm yes, yeah. There's a bit of a story with that too. Apparently, they got some potentially bad information when some of the educators,
Your parents.
but the educators of for us, the children, apparently found it necessary to relay to my parents that there was a communication problem, and they were actually encouraged not to speak Spanish in front of us for that reason. And the end result that came out of that was, number one, they wouldn't speak Spanish in front of us, although they would speak Spanish to each other and to their friends and neighbors. I mean, they even had church in Spanish too. But they wouldn't speak Spanish to us, which I found that to be rather odd. And they're very excellent communicators. That's kind of where I get my chops from in that way. Both of them happen to be very long winded. So you're probably going to hear from me more than from Connie here for that reason. But, I mean, the one, my father, was an ordained minister as well as a top salesman, and he was taught to speak a certain way so as everybody in the room could understand. And my mother had it naturally, and to this day she hasn't retired yet. She's still interpreting in the court systems out west. But it got to the point where, and I'm just going to say it because I don't know how else to say it. I'm very, very um, steeped in my research as far as racial reconciliation, so to speak, goes. And I I believe they did the best with what they could with what they had, but they ended up kind of going for a little bit for the white normativity trap, if you please. And to this day, I can recognize some of the different prejudices in the Hispanic culture. So, for example, whenever I do speak Spanish, which is part of the reason why I don't speak it very much, most of the Hispanic culture is from the mainland, central and southern areas, and they speak mostly a Spanish that's related to Spain. But I don't. I tend to speak something that's related more toward Puerto Rico, which they consider to be lowercase or lower caste. And some prejudices can arise out of that. But just so anybody else would know later on that white normativity isn't the only normativity that's out there. It can also exist in Hispanic culture. And it's just something that people need to be aware of as well. I'll stop there.
Sonia, is this something that you have can comment on, or
Uh, Mi familia es Latina is also Scott, so I understand what you're saying because of Castilian and they have a difference. But I think a lot of times what happens is that people get caught up in the circumstance of like what it is. But I think when, for me, my mother is Cuban, my father is Puerto Rican, so literally for me, Spanish is like my first language. I had to learn English, and so my grandparents, they always told me to make sure that I learned English, and they really invested in me going to school to really learn English, to make sure that I got rid of the acento so I could really kind of fit into American culture, that I wouldn't be looked down upon. So I think I really understand what you're saying, but I think a lot of times when it comes to even our culture, we can sometimes be critical, especially if you don't, pronunciation is like a little off, or you kind of use a little Spanglish there. People get a little upset with you. So I really understand that. And then on top of it, when you come into American culture, my grandparents and my parents always used to say, "Don't speak Spanish in front of Americans. They're gonna think you're talking about them, even though you're not." So I really can kind of feel where you're coming from with that. And I release the mic.
Yes, indeed. Although that is certainly not always the case. In fact, one of the reasons why I consented to this interview in the hopes that even I would be a little bit more willing, to be vulnerable in that way. Because here it is. So much of what has happened in the border communities that I've been exposed to is now here in this, what was a non border community. And I mean, I was just having a conversation earlier in the morning before returning home with some presumably, I want to say Mexican, but I'm not sure, but they're young. and relatively impressionable, and I don't want them to get any wrong impressions that would further any sort of prejudice. So I try to engage. I just try to engage. I've tried not to engage for so long that I don't. I The God that I believe in says that's a problem, and I have to deal with that. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. Even though it's a little haphazard and sometimes a little hesitant, but I'm still dealing with that, and it's yielding some fruit, surprisingly enough. Meanwhile, thankfully, it's a relatively easy problem to deal with here in the house. Although I do have some new neighbors that are also, because that's what they're doing, kind of like what some of your experiences with Sonya, with your parents. I'm noticing that a lot of the population that is moving here from south of the border is doing the same thing with their children, while they're remaining insular amongst themselves, which is something that I did not see in the other environments. I'll stop there.
All of this talk is just quite interesting. So, was this the first time for the two of you to date outside your culture?
Yes, it was for me. And when we met, well, not necessarily when we met. It was odd because the choir we were in a community choir, and it was not a church choir. And so we sang at different churches, but he was the only Puerto Rican, or he was basically the minority. We were all black. And he had soul, he could sing and everything. We were surprised. They had met him before I did, because when he first came, I was not at rehearsal. And when I came, he was assigned to stand next to me. And of course, I thought he was handsome, but I thought he was a Jesus freak, because he talked just like he talks like now, but about God and scripture and everything. But I think that was the first time. I was your first too.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Neither one of us had dated
it,
outside of our race at the end of the day.
something like that. I do bring to the table actually a failed relationship with someone who was actually born and raised in Canada and of British descent, and that was remarkably different even for me back then when I was you know out in the world doing my thing. But that was I'll say this and release the mic at this point. That 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 failed situation was what brought me to the Lord, and if anything, put me in a position to where I realized that if I wanted to have somebody, I was just going to have to be somebody first. Okay, and it was going to take a while for that phenomenon to occur, and it really wasn't until the very last transaction with this other that I'm referring to, where I finally realized where I stood in the on the social plane in general, that I was able to build some character and go on and actually act like the disciple that I said that I was. I'll stop there.
This is good. That's good that you were able to see what directions you needed to take so you could get some clarity. Now, Connie, I have this black girl question, shall I say? But anyway, this is a question that is often asked from people in our culture. So that's why I wanted to ask you this. What is your response if someone says to you, you couldn't find somebody in our culture?
Well, I I have not had to respond to that question before. Um, but someone did ask me, "Why'd you marry that white man?" I said he's not a white man, but it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with it. And this particular person's spouse seemed as if she was mixed, or she looked almost white herself. But if someone was to ask me today, I would tell them no. I had several failed relationships. And I only dated black men, and that's not who God had for me. They didn't work out. I'm not gonna bash black men or anything, because I have raised three black men, but that just it wasn't what God had for me. That's what the conclusion that I've come to. And God doesn't really care about our colors, the color of our skin. It's about who we believe in and who we worship. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
That is so true. It's really about who you're connected with and how you're treated and how you're not treated, et cetera, et cetera. When I first started doing this, I thought that I was probably the only one who felt like, um, if you want a new result, you should do something different. And so I've also recently come across several other ladies in our culture who say that, they it just didn't work for them in our culture. And now I really understand why, because a lot of it has to do with familiarity. Because in some people, when you're too familiar with them, you begin to get laxed, and then the relationship can start going downhill. And so I really do understand that when you want what you want better, so you do something different. And so I can appreciate the fact that we just apply that to this part of our lives as well. Yes, we do. Now, you mentioned that you raised three black men. So how many children do you all have?
Yeah, there we go.
Three boys, and they were all prior to our meeting,
Hmm.
and we never had any children together. We didn't get to have any mixed babies.
So Scott, that probably had to be an interesting dynamic for you. How old were the children when you got married?
Oh.
I've got it down to, I believe, right at from 15 to 6.
No, Ramirez was about three.
Okay, three. Yeah, yeah. It was when we first met, and oddly enough, the closest thing we've ever had to a close call was our frighteningly similar personalities between mine and the youngest. It was about the only challenge that I have. I have so many funny stories about Ramirez. Um, I will not tell them today, but they're good, and they keep me every bit of honest, and I'm as grateful as I know how to be that I am a part of their story, even in the presence of any absence on the part of the men that sired them, and they're not entirely absent, by the way. Okay, and one of the reasons why I recognize how a lot of that works is because I too come from a broken situation. Okay, and I'm going to say this as honorably as I know how, April and Sonia. The more I learned about the situation that I came from, the more I'm grateful to be from it rather than in it. Okay, and I'm very, very adamant that such things not be repeated. Okay, um, yes, I can say with confidence that everyone that we came from, and we as a whole, we in general, everyone we know, and the subtotal of our experiences come from people who did the best they could with what they had. Um, but I also recognize that in getting my own story straight, I also understand that it's that the stories of my predecessors factor into that, and that as much as possible. And Connie can speak to this on her own as well, about wanting to maybe repeat some things but not others. Okay, to speak honorably and speak well of who we come from, but making good and sure that we not repeat their mistakes. I'll stop there.
But also, I guess, well, Scott could say, not necessarily on my end, but there was more opposition and questioning as to why you're marrying outside of your race on his side of the family.
Mm-hmm.
His mom was not okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
they had their preconceived notions and ideas, the history and the habits of Black people.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
But she has come to love me.
Mm-hmm.
We're still together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she saw me as I already had 3 kids, so I understand. She's a mom,
Mm-hmm. And a divorced mom at that.
and she
That's
wanted
right.
the best for her son. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the things that I don't know, Sonia, if you can speak to this as well, but I do know it may be a human thing more than a cultural thing, that parents seem to superimpose their wishes and their choices in their lives upon their children, sometimes to the point of codependency, sometimes to the point of a fault where they really see their children as a reflection of themselves. And I do believe that with time, that has been, for the most part, dispelled, at least in my sphere and in the spheres that we represent. I'll stop there.
I like that because a lot of times what happens is a lot of families, because of cultural differences and different things in the divide, I think a lot of it plays into the way that maybe of being raised because I know like my family, we've always had like, my older relatives especially were kind of a little critical because my husband is Italian and black. And they were a little like, well, he's not Latin American and he's not going to value you and have the same beliefs and traditions as we do. And that wasn't the case at all. And I think it has to come part of the education because it's the culture. It's a old country, as I like to say, the old country, how they think of things. But as they got to know my husband as we were dating and they came to the wedding and everything, they love him. Like my family absolutely loves my husband, and his family, they've always loved me. Um, I'm actually a lovable type of person, so you know, it was very easy for us to kind of come together. And I think a lot of it comes down to we have to be willing to break some of those old world customs, not being so hard fast to that culture. I mean, I think as far as it goes, like I'm a proud Latina, and I have a biracial child, and I it's so funny because my family basically told my husband, well, you look Dominican anyway, so you Latin American with us anyway, so you riding with us no matter what. And so in turn, we got this little person too. So it's a lot of little things. So I just love how you shared that and even how you are redefining and breaking the legacy to make it into a different air, and that your legacy will be strong and that your children will walk with that same pride. So I love that. And so, April, I release the mic to you.
Thank you. You know, um, I had a few ladies that were concerned about how their children would be treated in this type of environment. And I know one gentleman, when he got married, um, he spent a lot of time with each child individually And what I found really interesting was that he and the daughter, there was two sons and a daughter, he and the daughter actually worked on a project together, and they actually I don't know what you call, if you call it refurbished or remodeled, but they did the mantelpiece in the new house, and it turned out to be beautiful. And I just wondered, like, Scott, when you first came, did you think about things that you would do with the children to help with the bonding, or were you just trying to make everything smooth, or how does that work in your mind, shall I say?
Yeah, it's a great question. It needs to be answered. It really does. Here it is, as best as I can tell you. Um, I'm flashing back to a remotely similar question that I had to somebody about, well, about ministry, because it was something that I was new to and I didn't understand it. And he said something that I didn't. It really just, it kind of went by me, but I never forgot it. And he just kind of shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly and said, "Well, Scott, 90% of all love and service is just being there and just showing up alive, and the other 10% will take care of itself." Now, I will say this though. I I don't know how that applies to this situation, because there is things that have to be done. But what I tried to do, which wasn't easy, is I've been an over the road truck driver for a long time, and it's only been in the last 5 years that I've been home consistently, and in fact, every night, as a matter of fact, I am a presence here. For a while, it was easy enough to get used to me, only because I was seen as a visitor, and
You were not seen as a
that well that I well you heard her, so apparently I would have seen myself as one. And I knew that I could only make so much impact in their lives as long as I was there, which was typically days at a time, sometimes as much as a week. But boy, I remember there was a hard time not that long ago where I wasn't around that much, and so here it is. You know, boy, I almost hate to say this out loud, because it sounds to even in my own ears, it sounds like a platitude saying the ministry of presence. That sounds like something only a professional would say. But I get it. Most of what I have done, and all my getting, and all my providing, and all my giving, is just simply, just being there, being willing to look in the same way I approach this black woman, if you want to call her that, which I still don't, by the way. I approach these, black children who are now men, all of them. Okay. One of them at one point had more money than I do. So they were definitely doing something that I wasn't doing when I was their age. Okay. That I wasn't able to do. So, the love and respect are the foundational code that I have in making any sort of approach to engage these young men now, and even at the time when they were children, to try my best to engage them and to love them, and to not assume, because I know there are a lot of men out there that do this, and I swore up and down that I would never, as much as possible, be one of these that try to take some sort of imaginary status and, as the word would say, lord it over them. Okay. But because you know what, this may come around, so I don't want to be long-winded, as sometimes I do, but there's something I want to get to that will probably come up in another question, but I just want to make sure I end it there for now. That I wanted to make sure that I did not lord my presence over them, but to make sure that I stood as one among them, and sat as one among them, and looked them in the eye, and tried my best to maintain an eye contact that was sometimes literally horizontal to them, to make sure that they knew that I wasn't looking down upon them. Because I knew they were already going to get that from the rest of the world. They were not going to come to my house and get that from me. I'll stop there.
I love it because that was giving them that dignity and grace, and also giving them the respect as this is their mother. They're their heir to her. So for
Mm-hmm.
you to even do that was just beautiful in itself. You know what? I think this is a good place for us to do a quick room reset, and then we'll come back in. You hear the dynamic discussion that we are having with Scott and Connie, who are really just sharing what it is to be in an interracial relationship and how it manifests in love. Listen, if you're not following the club, what's wrong with you? Come all the way up to the top of the page, Mansion, hit the bell so you're notified each and every time that a new discussion is birthed in this space. You are in the Authentic Love Academy. We are here every Tuesday evening, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we always have the best of the best discussions in here. If we're elevating your dating life to now that we're celebrating a couple during Loving Month, that's bringing everything together, showing you how it really can work, what it really sounds like, what it feels like, and the texture. Look, my name is Sonya LaRae. I'm a lifestyle relationship counselor, fashion psychologist, educator, motivational speaker, and by far honored to be the co moderator in here with the one and only April, the Loveologist. April, are you free to unmic? Because she was actually having some technical difficulties. Can you unmic, April?
Oh, yes, I'm back. I got it together here. Thank you so much for resetting the room. Connie and Scott, we're just thrilled and excited to have you here. Um, I don't know why I was thinking that one of you plays an instrument.
Yes, that would be me. That would be me. And I'm glad you said something because I've had so much, if anything, in my lifetime to this day. That's probably a present day challenge in my own life is that I haven't played in a while. And but I do. I yes, I do that. Music has always been a part of my life. One of the many positive memories I have is I learned music before I even learned how to communicate.
Hmm.
That's a very interesting. I don't know how else to say that without spilling into all of the details, but apparently I was practically in grade school before I was communicating in complete sentences. But I had a photographic memory for music since I was in diapers. So I guess a lot could be said about that. But yes, and then my dear here, she there in the classic church choir setting that we're speaking of, particularly because I like to say it that way because most Western pop culture's revering of music stems from the American Black Church, and the surrounding situations therewith. Okay, so people need to recognize that. And Constance here has a very natural, very good command of her own voice, and is one of the few that can sing both lead and background without supervision. I'm just saying. And that's why before we even were interested in each other, I leaned for about the first year that we knew each other, um, to make sure that I get my part because I knew she would get hers. And in some cases, she would learn it on the spot, even though she was functionally illiterate in music theory, whereas I'm not. She had it down naturally, which is something that I really get from a lot of the people from the African diaspora in general. They seem to have a very, very natural affinity for uh, musical media in general. It's very, very interesting to watch. We have a lot to learn from that. I'll
But he
stop there.
plays bass. bass guitar,
bass guitar and an acoustic guitar that I have sitting over here, and
lead guitar as well. He
yeah,
plays the guitar.
yeah, I do that.
So, do you guys have any particular appointments or speaking, singing engagements, or anything that you'd like to share with the audience?
We do not have any engagements. We attend a Baptist church, Morning Star Baptist Church. But Scott works on Sundays now. Occasionally we'll be asked to sing at a wedding. But yeah, we haven't been doing anything together because of our schedules.
And since you ask, I'm going to. I guess what my I can hear my mentor. She laughs at me every time I mention him. But he's one of the reasons why I'm still alive, and he's still with us. But the first thing he ever told me, April and Sonia, is that, Scott, you know what? People only do what's important to them. And Scott, you have a whole lot of ideas that are very important to you. Some may even be good, but some of them are going to kill you if you let them. And this is where we're going to have to go if you plan on sticking around, plan on staying physically abstinent, and plan on, you know, making the difference you say you want to make. Okay. And apparently, what I'm going to have to do is not just find the time I've been really convicted about this as of late, as just to not only find the time but make time, especially in, I mean, look at the platform that we're participating in. You and I have no excuse for not sharing our giftedness, and that includes me as well. I'll stop there.
I was just going to say, with all this talent that you have a pure gift in you. I'm classically trained, so I understand that with music and music theory, and I play several instruments. So, how is it that, you think that you're like, what is it that really, like, because I know you said you met during the choir and everything, but do you sing to each other or speak to each other in music and that connects you in a deeper way too?
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's funny because we have it, not to each other, not in a while, but we used to. Like I say, being distant, um, as far as as far as my primary contribution in the marketplace is how we've provided this home. And I do say that, I say home. Most people have a house. We have a home. Okay, and nobody bearing the Lord Himself, though nobody other than me knows what it took to get there and what it almost took to lose it. Okay, and I'm so grateful, as I know how to be, that we have this. But I believe there is room not only for improvement, but room for some very profitable, and you know what, some very necessary changes, because we do have that talent, we do have that affinity, and we do uh you know I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it the way I know how. God don't give stuff away just to be giving stuff away. It's
But
keep going.
I will say that I tend to maybe just sing a line or two to him more so than he does to me, because he's so serious about music and I'm playing around a lot of times.
Hmm.
But if I just think of something, well, how long was it? I think about a month ago.
Hmm.
I just called to say I love you. I recorded it, and then I was riding down the road, and was it Harmony?
I believe
I don't know,
so.
but
I believe so, yes, because you gravitate around harmony
yeah,
more so than the melody. That's right, you do.
we'll do more together. But in the past, the times that he may have attended a studio session with me or something, I felt like he was so critical that I didn't want him there because I felt like I couldn't get it right. But that's
Was
probably
he
the only
being
thing.
critical or were you just being nervous because he was there?
I wasn't. I guess I probably was nervous because he said you're going flat. And I'm not.
Listen, my I
I feel like, oh, he's not
He's
gonna
gonna
think I'm
hear me.
doing a good job.
Hmm.
But
No, I'm
yeah, we it's long overdue. We do need to record something together.
and I'm glad you said something about that because I have gotten that kind of flack from other people because I've had to calm down on that. I hear the 12 tone diatonic scale better than I want to hear sometimes. And at this point in my life, anyway, and it has been a deterrent. I mean, part of those memories I was mentioning earlier were basically telling my family members off for what they were not doing. And I still to this day, well, I know now where I got it from, but I didn't know then, and I didn't know how to appropriate it, and there weren't enough people around at that time to hone those skills. And so here we sit in a seemingly random event. I mean, I'm not going to go down that trail today either because I don't believe in randomness. Because that implies loose ends, and God doesn't have any. I'm just saying. But anyway, yeah, I've been sensing that, and you just confirmed my suspicion that it's time to do something different. I mean, I got a closet full of gear to prove it. So, more on that later. Oh,
Oh, sitting on your gift. I have a lot to say about that, but I won't. But let me ask you something too. With regards to everything that you've shared thus far, what have been some of the biggest challenges as far as it goes culturally that you've had to face, and even trying to even maybe like my husband is so funny because like I told you, he's African American and Italian. So pasta is a thing for them. I'm a Geechee. Rice. You come to my house, we got a pot of rice. It's gonna be beans. You're gonna eat. So has there ever been like a divide, or how did you kind of sink into the comfort of each other, be it from differences in food or difference in culture likes? How did you bridge that gap?
There hasn't been a big cultural divide, but I think it probably when there was a divide, I think it was more so in the church.
mm.
Cause
Oh, you
just
better say
like
that.
in the group,
You
he's
better
the
say.
minority
Mm-hmm.
at our church,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not as professional as some of the other churches,
Mm-hmm.
and including like with some of the music, everybody's not really talented enough. They are just in the choir,
Mm-hmm.
or some of the, I guess, the black traditional churches, but basically black traditions in the church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Great
I
is that.
think that has bothered him more than anything. For me, I wouldn't say it has bothered me because he's really taken, his favorite food has become basically um what do they call it? From New Orleans, that type of food,
Yeah,
Cajun.
the Cajun, yeah, the Cajun cooking.
Creole.
Yes,
Creole.
he
Oh yeah,
loves
yeah.
gumbo and
The jambalaya and the etouffee and
boudin.
Are you
the
all
boudin.
in Louisiana?
Oh
No.
no, we're in Tennessee, but
Oh,
I got hooked on the cooking because I used to go down there twice a week to deliver.
So that's basically his favorite, except
And
for
oh
his
yeah,
mom's
it,
paella,
yeah. Well, and in case you're ever there, because
which
it's the
I
only
don't think is that good.
no, right, no, and I would never tell it to her either.
I'm kind of picky.
She
I don't eat just anything.
right,
I'm not
right.
into all the seafood mussels and all that.
Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
she gave a great rendition of paella on a hot plate, no less. Okay, but some years later, I ran a dedicated lane in and out of Louisiana, and one of the delivery points was a restaurant chain that is familiar only to Louisiana, and everything they made was Cajun cooking on top of pasta noodles. That was the gimmick. And somebody got the bright idea to make paella with pasta noodles as the base instead of rice.
So
And
yeah,
oh yeah,
that's your favorite.
that's the one. When I got a taste of that, and I was done. I was done looking for the perfect meal.
So I learned, or I cooked gumbo and jambalaya for him.
Yeah, whenever we
But
can. Yeah.
my kids, when they were younger, of
Hmm.
course, they were not really crazy about that type of food. But he really pretty much learned to enjoy the soul food.
Hmm. Yeah. There was. Yeah. I'm glad she said. Glad she answered
He
it
said, "I forget
thusly.
you like spices."
Yeah. Because apparently us Puerto Ricans in particular, I think in Cuba it's a little bit more spicy, but apparently we're bland and we don't like to go too much further beyond the adobo. But
But
you
we
know, garlic
managed
salt.
when
Yeah,
we
we managed.
went to his
Yeah,
visit
my
his family
yeah.
last year,
Hmm.
and there was not any soul
Soul
food.
food at all, and it was
But
a
there were plenty of
big
dishes
spread.
that we enjoyed that
Yeah, and the
we
guys were
liked.
there with us. Carvis and Ramirez. Yeah, I'm glad they got to go and we got to be together and do that. And it was a fun, peaceful time. And I'm glad she made mention of that because it wasn't just our church morning star that was a bit of a thing as far as the way they like to do things. But apparently whatever happened at my old church, which was a predominantly white dominant culture church here in the area, at least the pastor there married us, and that was probably one of the last times I got to had any long term engagement with him. Um,
Yeah,
but
their church, his church, the church he was attending was predominantly white. Mine,
mhm,
I don't think there were any whites.
yeah,
Predominantly black.
at all, one
But
or
it's
two
so
maybe.
funny because he started playing the guitar at my church,
Church,
and
and
I
I
started
started
singing
singing
on the praise team at his
his.
church. So a lot of times he was at my church and I was at his church, and sometimes I was running back and forth, and his church was way on the other side of the town. But it
Yeah.
was important for him for us to belong to the same church, so he joined my church, and I was not really open to just joining, or they don't do the joining, but just primarily attending service
Hmm.
at his church because I love the gospel music, and there was none.
Hmm. Yeah,
But I
it's more
still
to the
just jumped right
experience.
in, and
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
welcomed me, and eventually, like, they got rid of the praise team. There was more than one, and they went to one, so that took me back to my church, and we were there together.
Hmm. Yeah, and if there was any apathy or ignorance on the part of my old church members, they were doing a good job of not showing it. Okay, I know it was there, but I know they were very guarded in the way. In fact, a lot of them are from the upper Midwest, which they have a tendency to behave in that way whenever they're you know presented with something like that. And yeah, so I'm glad that Connie was the first one to speak up to say the only possibility of resistance to our union was related to our church fellowships. Because if you see our video, there was a total of 7 different churches that were present there. I'll stop there.
Well, let me ask you this. What is one thing from each other's culture that you both have feel that has enriched your lives or has crossed the divide for you all? And I release the mic to you all.
You go first. I'm thinking.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, well, I'm glad you asked, and it does need to be asked, and it needs to be answered, and the more conversation we can have in this way, the better. At least for this time. Um, here's what I here's what I have for you at this time is that I recognize, and it wasn't until recent years that I learned how many ethnicities there really are. Say, for example, on the African continent. I mean, they got to be in the hundreds. We don't know anything about that. And then the proto ethnicities that so much of humanity comes from. The evidences tend to come from over there. So, and in fact, the biblical narrative that I have studied gives rise to carefree living and professionalism coming from those areas of the world, or at least in such a way that it was more pronounced in those areas of the world than in others. And that's my main takeaway. It is being honored to share any kind of space with people who do not. I mean, look, the joke in one of my houses in the family where I come from is we got all three sons of Noah in our DNA, so we're all jacked up. Okay. I don't know how true that is, but let me tell you something. When I hear that one side of my family was saying to my other side of the family, if heaven is going to have you in it, I'm not going. Okay. And I'm not making this up. You can find this for yourself in the history of what went down in the Caribbean before white male dominance started getting written into law here in the 1600s. This other stuff was going on at least 1 century before. And so I, I get it, man. I didn't just marry Connie. I married her family. I married her situation. I married her history. And I am as grateful as I know how to be part of the privilege and sharing in those things, even if all I am, which I'm not, but sometimes I still see myself as such, as a stand in, when the facts are that, look, I am what I am by the grace of God. And his grace, which was bestowed upon me, was not in vain. Okay, it's not for nothing that we are here. This is not a random event. This didn't just start because a tree fell on my car one day and I ended up moving to Tennessee a few months later. Okay, I take it in faith that God orchestrated these events, and so that I could see for myself the cultural setting that people around me refuse to acknowledge. Okay, and so much of what is in this cultural setting. I mean, if I wanted to take just one thing, out of Black American culture, for lack of a better expression, I would just say the openness and the honesty that people have amongst each other, and how approachable people actually are, and how they don't try to sweep things under the rug, and they just try to be real. We have a lot to learn just from that alone. Okay. And
So my turn.
yes, baby.
For me, it was, although they've had their history in the past, things haven't always gone well. And Scott, in his younger days, put his family through, but they have such a closeness and love for one another when we are there. He's been around my family because his family is in California. They're all out of town. So I've only really spent probably a handful of times with them. But they still like embrace us and love us, and they're very kind to us. Even if back in the day they may have had some words and thought he was crazy for marrying me, but that family culture that where they love to be with each other and talk all the time
Mm-hmm.
and like do things
Mm-hmm.
for each other. Like
Yeah,
they're
and
very
with.
hospitable.
Yes.
When we went
Yeah.
to California and we went to Disneyland, or was it Disney World,
Mm,
or wherever his sister took us, like on touring around and everything, they were very hospitable and welcoming. And once for my birthday, his mom and her friend decided, we went to, what was that, Stone Mountain, Georgia, and
Mm-hmm.
they decided they were going to Puerto Ricanize me, as they call it. So they cooked all of their Puerto Rican dishes and tried to cook 2 or 3 of the American dishes for my cousin and my boys.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was, Scott enjoyed it more than anybody. They wore their, what was those dresses, to put the little dresses on and played the music and everything. But that was really, really nice of them.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been great to us.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. I'll stop there.
This has been great. This has been quite educational and just very, very informative. Um, Miss Sonia, we seem to be at the top of the hour. What do you have for us next?
Oh my goodness. What do I have for you all next? Good grief. Look, I first of all want to tell Scott and Connie, it is such a pleasure to connect with you all, to hear your story, to see your walk and your journey into love and how you're elevating each other and your marriage. It's really a celebration. So we thank you so much for being here with us.
April, the loveologist, she's got a lesson or two. She's a love coach, a matchmaker, making dreams come true. She's a champion of interracial love, breaking down the walls. Hold up your dating experience to answer love's call. April, the loveologist, down to a T. She guides you through the journey, help you find your destiny. Find your destiny. Love and relationships, she's got the key.